Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rebound with Resilience, a podcast dedicated to raise your resilience, mindset, and mental wellness. And on this episode, we have a guest, a good friend of mine, and an inspirational figure to me. His name is Steve. Steve, I'm so happy to have you today.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm very excited and honored to be here to be part of this podcast with you, Kevin.
Sure.
Thanks for having me here.
No, thank you so much, Steve. It's so nice to catch up with you during this time, this COVID period, and have a conversation with you. So maybe I'll just give an introduction of you first. So Steve, like I mentioned, is a good friend and inspiration to me. We work together to actually conduct trainings and talks for schools and corporations. And apart from that, Steve is also a Team Singapore athlete, a cyclist, and he has won a bronze medal. He's competing in the 2021 Paralympic Games. At the same time, because of an eye condition, he lost his sight in his early 20s. But despite the struggle, he refused to let it hold him back. And right now, he's just involved in many campaigns to raise awareness. And his life is also an example to others as well. Okay, so today we're going to hear from Steve about his story and learn from him about how to adapt to new norms and how to build resilience. So Steve, maybe the first question I'd like to ask you, right, is during the ASEAN Paragames, after you won a medal, actually a reporter came to you and asked you for a quote, and you shared something that really impacted me, right? You shared that don't allow your disabilities to disable your abilities. So could I just ask you, where that actually came from and the meaning behind what you shared?
Yeah. So back then it was Singapore hosting the Paragames, and I was thinking everyone was talking about disability and abilities. So I was thinking something must be rhyming. I must think of something that rhymes.
Sure.
So that's where I come to this quote: "Do not allow disability to disable your abilities."
Right.
So that means I may have my disability, that is blindness, but I do not allow it to stop me from chasing my dreams. And I do not allow it to limit myself from achieve my goals. I like to use this quote during my talks. And usually I would like to relate it to the people I talk to. I mean, many of us may have their own disability, but in another way, such as self-limiting beliefs like fear. So everyone has fear. So people have lots of fear. Fear of the change, fear of embarrassment, fear of failure, fear of rejection. And actually all these are fear of the unknown, because fear is equal to false expectation or evidence appearing real.
Right.
Yeah. So we should not allow this self-limiting beliefs or fear to limit us from achieve our greatness.
Wow, I was really listening to what you shared, and that really spoke to me. I think what you mentioned about false evidence appearing real. I also listened recently that fear is something that is imagined. It's something that's occurring in the future. It hasn't happened yet, but we're actually allowing that to affect us in the present. And that is so fascinating. All right. So I think we'll talk more about that, about how to overcome fear, how to adapt to a new normal, especially today. But before that, I want to just maybe give viewers a bit of context into your story, your struggle and your overcoming. So maybe you could share with us, right, a little bit about your story, the things that you had to go through and how you overcome it.
So I was not born blind. I have seen the beautiful world. However, I lost the luxury of seeing things around me, and I become a casualty of blindness. Back then in 2004, after my national service, I was diagnosed with an incurable eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa. This eye condition causes me to have night blindness. That means I can't see well at night or at dim places. Over time, my vision will become narrower and blurrier. The doctor told me that there is no cure or treatment for this condition yet. And eventually, the condition will deteriorate over the years. Now, imagine a young teenager in his early 20s with high hopes and dreams, suddenly being told by the doctor that I have this incurable eye condition. How would you feel? So back then I was very depressed and I was in a state of shock. Why me? Why me? I was unable to do all the things I used to do. I was an outgoing person who enjoys sports activities. So I do sports like football, basketball, swimming, cycling, running, track and field. And I'm also unable to do the things we usually take for granted, like reading, traveling, watching dramas and movies. So I was in a state of depressed. I was so depressed that why this happened to me? And I tried to so-called do these activities, but usually end up with disappointment because I tend to bump into people and trip and fell and was physically injured all over my body. So I was physically hurt. And as I tend to bump into people, there were incidents where I bump into people and they get so annoyed and angry. So there's one incident where I accidentally knocked down a little boy and he started to cry. And his mom is so angry, so started to scold me and verbally abuse me. Say, hey, he said, hey, you cannot see it. You blind or what? So I was shocked at the point of time. I was just standing there helplessly. And I was emotionally hurt. So I was both physically and emotionally hurt. And I told myself, that's it. That's it. I doesn't want to go out of my house anymore. So I started to isolate myself and doesn't want to step out of my home. And one day, I was awakened by the sound of the thunder and was raining heavily outside. So I felt so hungry. I realized that I have not eaten for the whole day. So I went to the kitchen to search for food and there's no one in my house then. So I was so hungry that my stomach started screaming with hunger. And I decided to grab an umbrella to go and get my food. So while walking along the way, the road is slippery, the pathway is full of water. And unfortunately, I slipped, tripped, and fell onto the hard concrete ground. And before I know it, my knees were bleeding. So blood started to flow down to my shin area. And it was very painful. Yes, so painful that I on the verge of crying. I picked myself up and decided to continue my journey to get my food. So after I bought my food and I sit down and have my dinner, and that's where I realized something. Hey, if you are hungry, you will find a way to get your food. And if you are hungry, you will find a way to prevent yourself from getting wet by the rain. So likewise, if you're hungry, you'll find a way to overcome any obstacles or difficulties in your life. So at that moment, I was wondering, why am I losing my hunger, isolating myself, and doesn't want to do anything? Yeah. So that point is the turning point where I realized that I need to be hungry again. So I start to focus on solutions, and I continue to further my studies, study hard, sacrifice a lot of time, and graduated with a double major degree in IT, and achieved some Microsoft certifications. So I was so happy then. So I finally graduated. And yes, I thought, yes, I'm going to find a good job soon. But then in 2008, the world was struck by a financial crisis. So the 2008 financial crisis is one of the worst financial disaster since the Great Depression of 1929. And a lot of banks and financial institutions, they are on the verge of bankruptcy. And job market is badly hit as well. And fresh graduates find it hard to find a job. And fresh graduates like me with visual impairment even harder. I sent out around 20 open resumes. I went for job interviews. I told the employers that I have this eye condition. And they start to question me. They say, Steve, are you sure you're finding the right job? Steve, are you sure you can do this job? And I was unable to find a job for almost a year. And all my fellow friends in my university, they either started working or they have already found a job. So I was feel so depressed and dejected. Yeah, I feel like giving up. But then the inner voice of me told me that I can't stop there. I continue to improve myself because I'm a believer in change for the better. I start to improve myself, whether it's in resume writing skill, whether it's in communication skill, whether it's personal relation skills, whatever skills that can help me to find a job. And on my 30th interview, I was shortlisted to work in a call center.
30th interview.
Oh, yeah, my 13th interview.
Wow, okay.
So, yeah, so back then, I realized, hey, here is an opportunity. I should grab it. So, and give it a try. It was a new kind of industry for me, as I'm in an IT background and going into call center industry. And I worked hard, and within 2.5 years, I was promoted to be a team leader and a supervisor. So from there, I set a benchmark and become a role model for my peers. Yeah. And aside from work, I'm a para athlete as well. In 2015, I was introduced to play football again. So maybe right now you may wonder how a blind person is able to play football. Yeah, like what I was wondering back then. So I was so curious that I go and try it out. Yeah, so it's the blind football. I become a captain of the team and represented Team Singapore to participate in the ASEAN Paragames. So that is the stepping stone of my sports journey. And in 2017, I was introduced to another sport. It's Tandem Cycling. So Tandem Cycling means two person cycling on one bike.
Yeah.
And the person who can see is known as a pilot. He will help to control and navigate the bike. And I'm a visually impaired It's known as the stoker, STOKR.
Okay.
And I'll be at the back to try my best as hard as I can to help him, to ride and pedal the entire bike. All right. So it was hard and painful because I've not been cycling for almost 12 years then.
Mm.
And yeah, I cried through the pain and finally was able to represent Singapore again. And together we participated in the ASEAN Paragames in Kuala Lumpur. And we are lucky to win a bronze medal for Singapore then.
Right.
And that actually opens up more opportunities for us. And for the past year, in 2018, we won quite a few medals in ASEAN and Asian region. And last year in February, I received a good news that both my pilot and I, we have earned a slot for the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic.
Mm.
And that's my journey of Paralympic begins.
Wow. So happy for you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm excited as well.
Of course, it's postponed, right? And for the time being, because of COVID, we're supposed
Yeah, correct.
soon, right? Very soon, you're supposed to be preparing to go to Japan, but I
Yeah,
think it's still postponed, and your spot is still there, right? You're still guaranteed a spot for that.
yeah, correct. So right now, with the postponement, I'm just keep my finger crossed, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Sure, sure. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, thanks so much for sharing your story, Steve. I think I'm sure there were a lot more elements to it, but of course, you gave a summarized version. I'm sure you had to deal with a lot more things along the way, adapting along the way, and perhaps maybe we could explore that a little bit. Go in depth into how you overcome some of the rejection, some of the discrimination, also, and probably some self doubt that you actually faced during that time. So I mean, now during this period, right, I think everyone is talking about this word called new norms. And what it means essentially is like accepting that this isn't, you can't change this, and we have to adapt to it. We have to adapt to a new norm. So I would presume that when initially when you first lost your sight, right, there were a lot of new things you had to adapt. How to use technology,
Yeah,
how to move around, and so many things. Like, could you just share some of the things that you had to learn to adapt to?
sure. Back then, it was quite a challenge, for me to pick up some of the new skills that I need to do. So the first thing is to use the white cane. So white cane is like a symbol of identification and a safety tool for the visually impaired or a blind person.
Mm.
And it took me quite a while to use the white cane. Yeah, because back then, I have this fear of embarrassment. And I was thinking back then, what if my friends would see me using the cane? What if my relatives see me use the cane? And they may label me as a blind person. So back then I have this fear. And of course it's the ego thing as well.
Mm.
Yeah. So I have the fear of embarrassment, and it took me quite a while to have the courage
Yeah.
to use the white cane. And I take it step by step. As in, I don't go straight to use the white cane immediately.
Yeah.
So initially I started is like I only use it when I reach the train station, because that's where there's a lot of commuters, very crowded.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's where I start to take out the white cane from my bag and I start to use it. So I take it step by step. It took me quite a while to totally, use the white cane throughout. Yeah. So right now, once I step out of my home, I will start to use it. So it's like something I cannot miss.
Right.
It's like most of you cannot leave home without your smartphone.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, maybe we just talk about that for a while. I think during this period, a lot of people also find it difficult to change, because of fear of embarrassment or ego, and they think that they don't want to change. I mean, for myself as well, for longest time, I just thought that everything will return back to normal soon, for COVID, but it didn't. And I think maybe you can, any advice for people, right, who are in this position, right? It's also because you had the hunger, right? You had the hunger to want to change, and you took small steps, step by step,
Right.
right? So maybe you can explain what advice we give to people who are in a similar situation, who I find it difficult to adapt to new things in their life. It can be a student, right? It can be a working adult. It can be anyone listening to this podcast that is struggling to adapt. What's the mindset that you will share with them?
So for that, I come up with a 3-step approach.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, so that relates to me, and so step 1 will be change your mindset. Yeah. So George Bernard Shaw said, progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So that is the first step, that we need to change our mindset. We need to change our mindset to think positively of that change. That change, we must think that it can change for the better. So back then, when I was going to use a cane, I have a lot of negative thoughts, like, what if people see me? What if people label me? So I have lots of all kinds of negative thoughts in me back then. I started to think, hey, why not I just think, if I use a cane, things may be better. Maybe people will give way to me. They may help me. Yeah, so that's why it's very important. That is the first step we need to change. All right. Step 2 is step out of your comfort zone. So it's a normal human reaction that we have the resistance to change. Reason is being that we are so used to do all the things, or do all the routine, the same over and over again over a period of time. And that's where we stuck in our comfort zone. And we are afraid to step out of the comfort zone and step into the unknown. That's where a lot of people are also being overwhelmed by all the inside thoughts. They have all kinds of fear and anxiety. So there may have been questions like, what if I cannot cope with the change? What if I fail to meet the requirements to the change? Or what if I can't change anything? So all this is quite overwhelming, for a person who are in his comfort zone and suddenly asking, trying to step out of it. Definitely, he will feel the resistance.
Yeah.
What I will do is, for my case, there's a saying that goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I love that. One step.
So no matter how big the task is, just take a small step. So that's what I do. I take it step by step.
Sure.
Yeah. And the third step is inject some fun to the change.
Love it. Wow, nice.
Yeah, correct. So sometimes we are get so what do you call it? Too serious about the things we need to do. Maybe work on your study. We become too tense and serious. Sometimes we forget about the fun. So if we inject some fun to it, you may like to do it better.
Yeah.
So for my case, while I was using the white cane, hey, if I use the cane, so I have all kinds of funny thoughts then. So, I would say I will be like like a big truck coming to you. So everyone who's out of my way, you will get knocked down. I have all kinds of funny thoughts.
Okay.
So just to inject the fun so that I can able to do not have so much resistance to the change. Yeah. So easy for you to remember is CSI. Yeah. So step one,
Wow.
change your mindset. Step two, step out of your comfort zone. And step three, inject some fun.
Wow,
So
great.
just
I'll remember that for life.
yeah.
If I have a
So
fear, I would definitely remember CSI.
so just start investigating.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even moving out of our comfort zone is an investigation, right? I mean, it's something difficult, but we have to kind of investigate ourselves and understand that what are our weaknesses, and we start to progress and change, step out of our comfort zone and have fun in the process. I think that is so important. Sometimes even for myself, I get so caught up, and I realize I stop enjoying the process. I get so, like, for example, this podcast, right? I was so nervous thinking about all different kind of things, what people think of me if I screw up and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I
Me too.
realized, yeah, Steve,
Me too.
we had the same thoughts, right? But at the end of the day, right, we're just having fun, and I realized myself, why am I doing this? It's just to help other people to overcome as well. And when I have that mindset, there's nothing to fear. There's no judgment, because you're helping somebody. It's just okay to fail, we just have fun in the process. Okay,
Absolutely.
nice. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a great advice for our listeners. Perhaps I could also, before I move into the last segment, right, perhaps you also could talk about maybe a little bit of awareness of, your condition, as well as perhaps a little bit of discrimination that you faced back when you were looking for a job. So maybe even now, right, what are some misconceptions that people have towards you or towards maybe people who might have a visual impairment?
Out of the five senses we have, the sense of sight is the most important because we rely most of it. Yeah. So people tend to have that kind of mindset that if you lose your eyesight, I don't think you can do much thing in your life. Yeah. So example, many people think that people with visual impairment, they can't work. And that is not true. Because if you do some adjustment to your environment and some lifestyle changes, and plus with the help of this O&M, we call it orientation and mobility from your home to your workplace. So to let the blind person or the visually impaired person to get familiar with the surrounding and some re-engineer of the workplace environment. Right? And most importantly, to install those software. So there is the text-to-speech software where it helps us to work. So what this software does is it read out whatever thing on the screen. Yeah, so either it's on the smartphone or the computer.
So, Steve, maybe you want to give us an example of how that works for the listeners to understand? Yeah.
Okay, so once that accessibility option is being enabled, so the phone becomes a tool for us to use. So whatever I touch on screen, it will read out. Okay. So for example, you see the icons around here. Yep. So I just move my fingers around here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you get used to it over time, right? Because for me, I may not be able to actually make out what the person is actually saying, right, initially.
Yeah, correct.
But after a while, you get used to it, you adapt to a new normal, right? In a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So initially, start off with a normal kind of speed on the speech. So over time, when I get used to it, so I set the speed of the speech faster and faster.
Wow.
So the reason is so that we can navigate around faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the reason. So don't be, feel surprised when
Yeah.
maybe on the street, suddenly, you see someone, how come
Yeah. Yeah.
hear a lot of robotic sound come out from the phone, that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so that helps us a lot of things. So I can do a lot of things on the smartphone,
Sure.
like text messaging, online
Actually,
shopping.
calling and everything very
Yeah, correct.
independent. Okay. Actually, there's one
Yeah.
thing I realized also when I first met you. Right, this is something that I didn't know as well until you
Mm,
actually told me, and then you shared with me how you were able to work independently and live a normal
yeah,
life.
correct.
Hence, yeah. So I was really inspired by that for sure. Let's
Well,
move on to the last segment, which is more of your life as an athlete now. Now you're an avid athlete, you train every day, and I think there's a lot to learn from athletes, right? So maybe share with us
mm,
what was the mindset for you in training for the Paralympics, in training for the Olympics, right? What was that?
mm.
Yeah, do you have anything that motivates you, or what? Maybe just share with us your training routine on a day-to-day basis.
Right now, I train around 6 to 9 times a week, depending on the training program. So most of the time in the morning, say Monday to Saturday mornings, I will have my back session. Yeah, so each session lasts from 1 hour up to 4.5 hours. And usually I have my own strength and conditioning session on alternate days, say Monday, Thursday, and Friday.
Mm,
Yeah, in the late afternoon. Yep. So it's tough. It's not easy. So I have to, yeah, grind through the pain and get used to the training.
yeah, I can imagine because I did a bit of cycling in the past, right? It's nothing compared to what you do, the miles that you do, and my legs were really
Mhm.
cramping up, at a certain mark. It's so
Yeah,
difficult
correct.
to, yeah, because it's you got to work on your endurance, muscle endurance, your thighs, just pounding at the bicycle, you know, uh,
Mm.
con-
I do have times where I feel, I want to give up, I want to stop. Because um, it was tiring, and sometimes my body is unable to take it. And but then I realized that, hey, my ultimate goal is to go to the Paralympic. Yeah, and that keep me going. And most importantly, I think it's still the hunger for me to define my limits,
right.
and that is the key to keep me going.
Defying your limits is something that defines you. When I think about you, this is what I think about, the hunger to defy your limits. Yeah, so thank you so much for inspiring not just me, but so many people as well. And recently you were part of a
Oh,
campaign as well, right? Called Defy Your
yeah,
Limit. I
correct.
saw the video that was produced.
Mm,
It was quite inspirational. So I guess we have to kind of wind down already. But before maybe we close for today, right? What are
mhm.
these? There's some lessons that and insights that you picked up during this COVID-19 period? Because I know your training had to be disrupted a little bit, right? And then a lot of things, but what was do you have any takeaways or insights from this period?
Um, I always believe that that every cloud has a silver lining. So many people may see a lot of difficulties in this circuit breaker, but I sees an opportunity out of it.
Mm,
An opportunity for me to take a step back, to reflect and evaluate what is important in my life. Like, what have I done for the past year? What have I achieved? What are my weaknesses? And how can I improve it?
mm,
Yeah. And next would be, I realized that when this circuit breaker kicks in, most of the Singaporeans, they are quite cooperative
mm,
and united. That reminds me of a J.K. Rowling quote. She said, "We are only as strong as we are united, as weak as we are divided."
Wow.
So we have to continue to stay united, and we will sure be able to overcome this pandemic.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the message, Steve. So, what's next for you, Steve? What are your goals in future?
All right. Aside from the Paralympic, and I hope to continue to improve my public speaking skills, and I hope to have more solo talks.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and so I also hope to share more about my stories and some of my concepts and principles, which I think is important to share it to the people. Next will be to build a personal branding on myself on social media, which I have been thinking and planning for quite a while. Yeah, so there's a few things which I need to do first, and so there's quite a few things I need to prepare here and there.
Okay.
So these are the two things which
goals.
I'm looking forward to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I really hope, during this period or after this period, we have more chances to work together, to go to schools, to give talks, to give trainings, and just inspire more students and more people to defy their limits, and build their resilience in them, just like how you've done for yourself. And you guys can also find Steve on social media. Right, you want Steve, and I tell them where to find you. I think Steve T on Facebook. I will link them up in the podcast. I'll put a link to your Facebook page and your Instagram as well.
So right now, y'all can look me up and just add me first as a friend. And when the time comes, I will invite all of you to my page.
Sure. Okay. Nice. Okay. So the last question before we wrap up this podcast, what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience is the capacity to recover from difficulties. For me, it's the ability to bounce back from setback. Yeah. And that reminds me of Nelson Mandela, who said, "Don't judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." And that quote really inspired me. And I think that's what resilience means.
We've come to the end of our podcast today. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today. And I'm just looking forward, once again, I know I said it so many times, but I'm looking forward to working with you more in future as well. Okay? So yes, guys, this is the end of the podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. In the meantime, stay safe and stay resilient. And we'll see you guys.